Nathan Cole stood frozen in the center of Orion Dynamics' production floor, his hand pressed against the metal housing of a machine worth $80 million. Through the vibration under his palm, he felt it, a grinding irregularity deep in the calibration system that shouldn't exist. In 6 hours, investors would arrive to watch this same machine demonstrate the technology that would either save the company or destroy it. Nathan looked down at the maintenance uniform he'd worn for 3 years, the name tag that identified him as nobody important, and knew with absolute certainty that if he stayed silent, everything would collapse. But the last time he'd tried to be someone important, his wife had died alone while he chased deadlines in a lab just like this one. If you want to see how a man who lost everything risks it all one more time, stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey reaches. Patami. The maintenance closet on the 4th floor of Orion Dynamics smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Nathan Cole kept a camping chair wedged between the shelving units where he stored his tools, and that's where he sat during his lunch break, eating a peanut butter sandwich while Emma's crayon drawing of the two of them hung on the wall above a box of replacement filters. She'd drawn him taller than he actually was, his smile bigger than he'd managed in years. His phone buzzed. Emma's school. "Mr. Cole? This is Principal Morris. Emma's fine, but she got into an argument with another student during recess. Something about her father being a genius? The other child said you were just a janitor, and Emma became quite upset." Nathan closed his eyes. "I'll talk to her. She's very defensive of you. I think she's proud." After he hung up, Nathan stared at the drawing for a long time. 6 years old and already fighting battles he'd tried to hide from her. He'd thought the uniform would make him invisible, that invisibility would keep him safe. Instead, his daughter was throwing punches on a playground because kids repeated what their parents said at dinner tables, that maintenance workers were failures, that smart people did important things. His wife Rachel would have known what to say to Emma. Rachel always knew the right words. Nathan just knew how to fix machines. The radio on his belt crackled. "Cole, we need you in Production Lab C. Something's making noise." He wrapped the second half of his sandwich and headed down. Production Lab C took up half the 3rd floor, a massive space filled with robotic assembly equipment and the quantum calibration system that represented Orion Dynamics' entire future. 3 years ago, when Nathan had first taken the maintenance position, he'd walked past this lab every day and felt nothing. Now he serviced the equipment twice a week and tried not to remember that he'd once understood every line of code running through these machines. 4 engineers stood near the main console, all of them young enough that they'd probably graduated after Nathan had left the industry. The shortest one, wearing a company polo that looked fresh from the package, waved him over. "There's a clicking sound. Started about 20 minutes ago." Nathan listened. The lab hummed with the normal operational noise of a dozen systems running simultaneously, but underneath, there it was. A subtle rhythmic tick, almost imperceptible, coming from somewhere inside the primary calibration unit. "Could be a loose fastener," the engineer said. "We've got the investor demo at 6. Can you just tighten whatever's rattling?" Nathan set down his toolbox and moved closer to the machine. He placed his palm flat against the housing, feeling the vibration travel through the metal. The tick wasn't coming from a loose bolt. It was deeper, more irregular, a mechanical stress pattern that suggested something grinding where it shouldn't be grinding. "I need to access the interior calibration chamber." The engineer frowned. "That requires a full system shutdown. We're running final tests." "Then you should shut it down." "For a clicking noise?" The engineer glanced at his colleagues, who'd stopped their work to watch. "Look, just tighten what you can reach from outside. We can do a full diagnostic after the demo." Nathan straightened. "The clicking is a symptom. Something inside the calibration system is misaligned." The diagnostics show green across the board. Your diagnostics aren't listening for mechanical stress patterns. I am. The engineer's expression shifted from annoyance to something colder. "Are you seriously trying to tell me how to read my own equipment?" "I'm telling you there's a problem. Your maintenance. Your job is to sweep floors and change air filters, not interpret diagnostic data you don't understand." Woltz. Matis. Nathan felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the one that always came when he had to decide whether to push back or let it go. 3 years of letting it go. 3 years of nodding and moving on and staying invisible. I understand the diagnostics fine. I also understand that quantum calibration systems don't make clicking sounds unless something in the resonance chamber is experiencing friction it wasn't designed to handle. If you run the demo with that stress pattern active, the system will fail. Based on what? Your maintenance expertise? The engineer turned to his colleagues. Did we hire a psychic janitor? One of the others laughed. The sound echoed in the high-ceilinged lab. Nathan picked up his toolbox. Then you should probably call someone who'll tell you what you want to hear. He was halfway to the door when the engineer called after him. Wait, Sherwin, you can't just make some ominous prediction and leave. Either there's a real problem or there isn't. Which is it? Nathan stopped walking but didn't turn around. There's a problem. You're not going to believe me until it's too late. So what? You want me to shut down the entire production line 6 hours before the biggest demo in company history because you heard a clicking sound? I want you to shut it down because the machine is telling you it's failing and you're not listening. The machine is telling me everything's perfect. Nathan finally turned. Then I guess you'll find out at 6 o'clock. He left before the engineer could respond. Behind him, someone muttered something about maintenance workers with attitude problems, and someone else laughed again. Nathan took the stairs instead of the elevator, his footsteps loud in the concrete stairwell, and tried to convince himself he'd done the right thing. By the time he reached the 4th floor, he wasn't sure anymore. Claire Bennett sat in her father's office, her office now, though she still thought of it as his, and reviewed the investor presentation for the 9th time. $80 million. That's what Thomas Grayson and his venture capital firm were bringing to the table, contingent on a successful demonstration of the quantum calibration technology. $80 million that would keep Orion Dynamics solvent through the next fiscal year, fund the expansion into 3 new markets, and prove to the board of directors that Claire hadn't destroyed her father's legacy in the 2 years since his death. Her phone buzzed. David Park, the head of engineering. We're ready. All systems green. The machine's performing beautifully. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd holding. Any concerns? None. We'll run one more diagnostic sequence at 4, but I'm confident. You're sure? Claire, we've been testing this system for 6 months. I've never seen it run smoother. After they hung up, Claire stood and walked to the window. From the 5th floor, she could see the parking lot beginning to fill with early arrivals for the evening's event. Catering trucks. A V setup. Security. Everything moving according to plan, everyone doing their jobs, the entire company synchronized around this single moment. And yet her stomach hurt. She'd been running Orion Dynamics for 23 months, and her stomach had hurt for 23 months. Every decision felt like a guess. Every meeting felt like a performance. Her father had built this company over 30 years, turning it from a garage operation into a tech firm worth $500 million. And Claire had inherited it with a business degree she'd barely finished, and no idea how to fill the space he'd left behind. The board had made their feelings clear. Richard Voss, the CFO and her father's oldest friend, had actually said the words, "Your father wanted you to have this opportunity, but if you can't deliver results, we'll need to consider alternatives." Alternatives meant replacing her. Alternatives meant admitting she wasn't enough. The demo had to work. Claire returned to her desk and pulled up the personnel file she'd been avoiding all morning. Nathan Cole, maintenance contractor, 32 years old, hired 3 years ago. High school diploma, no college, previous employment in... She stopped. Previous employment in advanced engineering at Helix Systems. Claire read the line twice. Then she picked up her phone and called HR. Margaret, I'm looking at Nathan Cole's file. It says he worked in advanced engineering before coming here. That's correct. Advanced engineering, not maintenance. He applied for a maintenance position. We hired him for the position he wanted. Did anyone question why an engineer would apply to clean floors? Margaret's voice cooled. We're not in the habit of interrogating applicants about their career choices, Ms. Bennett. He was qualified for the position. We had an opening. Is there a problem? Claire looked at the file again. Something about it bothered her, but she couldn't identify what. No problem. She hung up and stared at the name. Nathan Cole. She'd seen him around the building, usually in stairwells or maintenance closets. Always alone, always quiet. She'd never spoken to him directly. Why would she? He emptied trash bins. Except, apparently he used to design the same kind of systems that were currently sitting in Lab C, worth $80 million. Claire made a note to follow up after the demo, then forced herself to focus on the presentation. Whatever Nathan Cole's story was, it wasn't her priority today. What? Nathan picked Emma up from after-school care at 4:30. She ran to him across the parking lot, her backpack bouncing, her face breaking into the smile that always made the rest of the world feel smaller and quieter. Daddy! He caught her and lifted her, even though she was getting too big for it. Hey, Trouble. I'm not Trouble. Principal Morris called me today. Emma's smile faded. She looked at her shoes. Owen said you were just a janitor. He said janitors are for people who aren't smart enough for real jobs. Nathan set her down gently. What did you say back? I said you were smarter than his dad, and his dad was stupid. Emma. But it's true. You know everything. You help me with my homework, and you fix things, and you... She stopped, her eyes welling up. You're not stupid, Urki Maho. Nathan knelt down so they were eye to eye. Owen's wrong. Being a maintenance worker doesn't mean I'm not smart. It means I choose to do a job that lets me pick you up from school every day. That's what matters to me. But you could do something important. You're important. I mean, like in a big building with other smart people. Nathan pulled her into a hug. She smelled like playground wood chips and fruit snacks. Listen to me. I had that job once. I worked in a big building with other smart people. And you know what happened? I was so busy being important that I forgot to be a good dad. I don't want to forget again. Emma pulled back. Did Mommy get mad at you? Mommy understood, but she also wanted me to be around more, and I didn't listen fast enough. Is that why she's gone? Nathan's throat tightened. No, baby, she's gone because she got sick. That's not anyone's fault. They walked to his truck, a 15-year-old Ford with a dent in the passenger door and 183,000 miles on it. Emma climbed into her booster seat and started talking about her art project, and Nathan drove them home while she narrated her day in the rearview mirror. When they pulled into the driveway of their rental house, small, older, but clean and safe, Emma asked if they could have pancakes for dinner. Pancakes or breakfast? Pancakes are whatever we want them to be. Nathan smiled despite himself. You sound like your mother. They made pancakes together. Emma insisted on cracking the eggs, which resulted in shells in the batter and yolk on the counter. But Nathan didn't correct her. They ate on the couch, watching a nature documentary about penguins, and Emma fell asleep before the second commercial break. Nathan carried her to bed, tucked her in, and stood in the doorway watching her breathe. 6 years old, first grade, growing up fast enough that he sometimes felt like he was falling behind. His phone buzzed. A text from Eric, one of the other maintenance contractors, someone Nathan occasionally had lunch with. Did you hear? The big demo crashed during final testing. Engineers are freaking out. System shutdown. Whole thing delayed. Nathan stared at the message. Then he grabbed his keys. Orion Dynamics looked different at night. The parking lot was half full with cars belonging to engineers, executives, and the catering staff scrambling to adjust for a schedule that had just exploded. Nathan badged in through the employee entrance and took the stairs to the third floor. Lab C was chaos. At least 15 people crowded around the calibration system, everyone talking over each other, voices sharp with panic. David Park stood near the main console, his polo shirt untucked, his face pale. When he saw Nathan, his expression shifted to anger. What are you doing here? I heard there was a problem. We've got it handled. Nathan looked past him at the machine. The clicking sound had stopped, replaced by an irregular grinding that was audible even over the noise of 15 people shouting. Doesn't sound handled. You need to leave. I told you this would happen. David's face flushed. You told me there was a clicking sound. You didn't tell me the entire system would... He stopped, visibly trying to regain control. This isn't your concern. We're running diagnostics. Your diagnostics missed it the first time. We're not having this conversation. You're maintenance, not engineering. Get out. Nathan should have left. He tried to warn them. They'd ignored him, and now they were dealing with the consequences. It wasn't his problem. It wasn't his life anymore. He'd left that life behind on purpose, and walking back into it meant risking everything he'd built with Emma. But then he saw Claire Bennett standing near the wall, her arms crossed, her expression caught somewhere between fury and fear. She looked young, too young to be running a company, too young to be dealing with a crisis this big. She looked exactly how Nathan had felt 3 years ago when Rachel's oncologist had said the word terminal and Nathan's brain had short-circuited because he'd been too busy optimizing production schedules to notice his wife was dying. The calibration chamber needs to be completely disassembled, Nathan said. The resonance couplers are grinding against the quantum array. You've got metal shavings contaminating the system. Diagnostics won't catch it because the software assumes the hardware is properly aligned, but it's not. Someone made an adjustment during installation and threw off the tolerances by 0.03 millimeters. The lab went quiet. David stared at him. How could you possibly know that? Bakishitan. Because I can hear it. Because I designed systems like this for 8 years before I took a job mopping your floors. You're lying. I worked at Helix Systems. I have 12 patents related to quantum calibration architecture. I left the industry in 2022, and I've spent the last 3 years trying to pretend I never knew how any of this worked. But I know. And if you don't disassemble that chamber and realign the couplers manually, you're not just going to lose the demo. You're going to destroy $80 million worth of equipment. David looked at Claire. Claire looked at Nathan. The room held its breath. Then Richard Voss stepped forward. Nathan recognized him from company emails. CFO, board member, one of the old guard who'd been with the company since its beginning. His expression was cold. If you know so much about quantum calibration, why are you working in maintenance? Nathan met his eyes. Because my daughter's more important than a career. How convenient. Now that we're in crisis, suddenly you're an expert. I've been an expert the whole time, you just didn't ask. We're supposed to trust a janitor who claims to be a secret genius? Voss turned to Claire. This is absurd. We'll bring in an emergency consultant from Helix or Quantum Forge, someone with credentials. They won't get here in time, Nathan said. Your investors arrive in 90 minutes. Then we delay. Delay and they'll walk. You know it. They're already nervous about your Q3 numbers. If you can't deliver on schedule, they'll interpret it as incompetence. Voss's jaw tightened. And if we let you touch that machine and you make it worse, then I'll be the janitor who broke your company. Fire me. Sue me. I don't care. But I'm the only person in this room who knows how to fix this in time. Claire pushed away from the wall. Everyone out. Now. David blinked. What? Everyone out except Nathan. If he breaks it, we're already dead. If he fixes it, we survive. Those are the options. She looked at Nathan. You have 80 minutes. Don't make me regret this. The room erupted in protest, but Claire didn't budge. Slowly, the engineers filed out, David leaving last with a look that promised consequences. Richard Voss stayed near the door. I'm documenting this decision, he said to Claire. Document whatever you want. When the door finally closed, the lab felt enormous and silent. Nathan turned to the machine and took a breath. Claire stood beside him. Can you actually fix this? I don't know. That's not reassuring. You want reassuring or you want honest? She almost smiled. Honest. Then honestly, I haven't worked on one of these systems in 3 years. The technology's evolved. I might be wrong about the diagnosis. Even if I'm right, there's a chance I damage something else while fixing the primary problem. Best case, we get the demo back online with minutes to spare. Worst case, I'm unemployed and you're explaining to your board why you trusted the janitor. Why are you here? Nathan looked at her. Because my daughter thinks I'm a genius, and I want her to be right. He opened his toolbox and got to work. Disassembling a quantum calibration chamber required patience. Nathan wasn't sure he still had. His hands shook as he removed the outer casing, exposing the array of resonance couplers and quantum processors that formed the machine's core. Everything looked familiar and foreign at the same time, like returning to a childhood home and discovering all the furniture had been rearranged. Claire watched from a few feet away, her phone buzzing constantly with texts she ignored. How long were you at Helix? She asked. 8 years. Started as a junior engineer, worked my way up to lead architect on the Meridian project. I remember the Meridian project. It was supposed to revolutionize industrial manufacturing. It did, for about 6 months. Then the company pivoted to military contracts and I left. Why? Nathan didn't answer. He carefully extracted the first resonance coupler and examined it under the work light. The surface showed microabrasions exactly where he'd predicted. Metal shavings. Contamination. Proof he'd been right. Your wife, Claire said quietly. That's why you left. Nathan set down the coupler. How do you... I pulled your file this afternoon. It listed your emergency contact. Then I searched for Rachel Cole and found an obituary. She paused. I'm sorry. I was working 80-hour weeks. She was going through chemotherapy alone. By the time I slowed down enough to see what was happening, it was too late. And you blame the career. I blame myself for choosing the career. Nathan picked up the second coupler. After she died, I couldn't go back to that life. Emma was 3 years old. She needed a parent who'd actually be there. So I applied to every maintenance position I could find until someone hired me. It's simple work. Predictable hours. Nobody expects genius from a janitor. Except your daughter. Yeah, except her. They worked in silence for several minutes. Nathan removed all 6 resonance couplers, inspected each one, cleaned away the metal contamination, and began the delicate process of realigning them manually. It was the kind of work that required absolute precision, 0.01 millimeter off, and the system would still fail. At 62 minutes, Nathan's phone rang. Emma's daycare provider, Mrs. Chen. I'm working late, he said before she could ask. Can Emma stay with you? Of course. But Nathan, she's worried. She heard you leave the house and thought something was wrong. Can I talk to her? A moment later, Emma's voice came through the phone. Daddy? Hey. Tiwan. Trouble. I had to help with something at work. Are you in trouble? No. I'm helping fix a machine. Like a broken thing? Exactly like a broken thing. Are you using your smart brain? Nathan smiled despite the tension in his shoulders. Yeah, I'm using my smart brain. I knew it. I told Owen you were the smartest. You should probably stop fighting with Owen. Only if he stops being wrong about you. After they hung up, Nathan found Claire smiling at him. What? She sounds like you. She sounds like her mother. Rachel was the stubborn one. At 40 minutes, Nathan had the couplers realigned and was beginning reassembly. His back ached from bending over the machine and his hands were cramping, but the work felt good. Familiar, like remembering how to speak a language he'd convinced himself he'd forgotten. At 25 minutes, the outer casing was back in place and Nathan was running preliminary diagnostics. The system initialized without error codes. The grinding sound was gone. Claire moved closer. Is it fixed? Diagnostics say yes, but we won't know until we run a full operational test. We don't have time for a full test. The investors are in the building. Nathan straightened and wiped his hands on a rag. Then let's hope I got it right. They walked to the main console together. Nathan pulled up the control interface, his fingers moving across the keyboard with muscle memory he didn't know he'd retained. Commands appeared on screen, sequences initialized. The machine hummed as power flowed through the newly aligned calibration system. Here we go, Nathan said. He executed the startup sequence. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then the quantum array activated, light rippling across the processors, and the calibration chamber began its measurement cycle. Numbers scrolled across the monitor. Tolerances held. Precision within acceptable range. Everything green. The machine stabilized into full operational mode. Claire let out a breath that was almost a laugh. You did it. We need to run the demo to be sure. We will. She checked her watch. 12 minutes. Yeah. Nathan saved the diagnostic report and stepped back from the console. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his hands were shaking, and his heart was pounding hard enough that he felt lightheaded. But the machine worked. He'd fixed it. The lab door opened. David Park entered, followed by Richard Voss and 3 other engineers. David stopped when he saw the active system. It's running. It's fixed, Claire said. Nathan realigned the calibration chamber. We're ready for the demo. David walked to the console and pulled up the diagnostics. His expression shifted from skepticism to disbelief to something that might have been grudging respect. The resonance couplers were off by 0.03 millimeters. How did you... I told you there was a problem, Nathan said. You didn't believe me. Because you're maintenance. I'm maintenance who saved your demo. Richard Voss stepped forward. We'll need to verify this before we bring investors into the room. Oh, we have 8 minutes, Claire said. Either we trust the fix or we cancel the demo. Choose. Voss looked at Nathan with an expression that was pure calculation. If this machine fails in front of Thomas Grayson, I'm holding you personally responsible. Nathan picked up his toolbox. If it fails, You won't be able to afford to sue me anyway. He walked out before anyone could respond. His hands were still shaking. His chest felt tight. But underneath the exhaustion and fear, there was something else. Something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Pride. Nathan didn't stay for the demo. He drove back to Mrs. Chen's house, picked up Emma, and took her home. They brushed teeth and read 2 chapters of the book they'd been working through together, and when Emma asked if he'd fix the broken thing, Nathan said yes. "I told you," Emma said, her eyes already closing. "You're the smartest. Go to sleep, Trouble." But she was already gone, her breathing slow and even. Nathan sat in the living room with his phone in his hand, waiting for something he couldn't name. At 8:40, the phone buzzed. A text from Claire Bennett. "The demo worked. Investors approved the full $80 million. You saved us." Nathan stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, "Good. Glad I could help." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. My office. 9 a.m. Nathan set down the phone and closed his eyes. He'd spent 3 years building a life where nobody expected anything from him, where he could be invisible and safe and present for Emma. One machine. One night. And now the CEO wanted to talk. He knew what she was going to offer. He knew what it would cost. And he had no idea what he was going to say. Nathan woke up at 6:15 to Emma standing beside his bed, already dressed in mismatched socks and a shirt with a dinosaur on it. "You have to go to work early," she said. He rubbed his eyes. "How do you know that?" "Your alarm went off and you didn't hit it 5 times like normal. That means it's important." Oh. Nathan sat up. The meeting with Claire was at 9, which meant he had time to make breakfast, drop Emma at school, and still arrive early enough to feel like he had his bearings. Except he didn't have his bearings. He'd barely slept, his mind running through every possible version of the conversation ahead, and none of them ended well. They ate cereal together at the kitchen table. Emma kicked her feet against the chair legs and talked about a field trip coming up, something about a science museum, and Nathan tried to focus on her words instead of the tightness in his chest. "Can you come?" Emma asked. "Come where?" "The field trip. Parents can come if they want." Nathan poured more milk into her bowl. "When is it?" 2 weeks. Mrs. Patterson says we're going to see rockets and planets and stuff. I'll check my schedule." Emma studied him with an expression too serious for a 6-year-old. "You look worried." "I'm not worried. You're making the face." "What face?" "The face you make when you're thinking too hard about grown-up stuff." Nathan tried to smile. "I have a meeting this morning with my boss." "Are you in trouble?" "No. I think she wants to talk about the machine I fixed." "See, I told you that you were smart." Emma took another bite of cereal, completely confident in her assessment of the world. "She probably wants to say thank you." Nathan didn't correct her. He finished his coffee, cleaned up breakfast, and drove Emma to school. She hugged him before running toward the building, her backpack bouncing, and Nathan sat in his truck for a moment watching her disappear through the doors. Then he checked the time and drove to Orion Dynamics. The building looked different in morning light, cleaner, less chaotic. Nathan parked in the employee lot and sat with the engine off, trying to remember the last time he'd walked into an office for a meeting that actually mattered. 3 years. It had been 3 years since he'd cared about anything beyond making sure Emma was happy and the bills got paid on time. He badged in through the main entrance instead of the employee door. The lobby was all glass and steel, designed to impress visitors, and Nathan felt immediately out of place in his maintenance uniform. A woman at the reception desk looked up as he approached. "I have a meeting with Ms. Bennett." She checked her computer. "Nathan Cole? That's me. 5th floor. Her assistant will meet you at the elevator." So, Nathan took the elevator up. His reflection stared back at him from the polished metal doors. 32 years old, looking older, wearing a uniform with his name stitched above the pocket. The doors opened and a young man in a suit extended his hand. "Mr. Cole? I'm Jason. Miss Bennett is expecting you." They walked down a hallway lined with photographs of the company's history. Nathan recognized Claire's father in several of them, James Bennett, founder and former CEO, shaking hands with investors, cutting ribbons, standing in front of buildings that hadn't existed when Nathan was still in the industry. There was one photo near the end of the hall that showed James with a teenage Claire, both of them smiling at some company event, and Nathan could see the resemblance. Same sharp eyes, same expression that looked like they were solving a problem even while posing for a camera. Jason stopped at a door with Claire's name on it. Go ahead in. Claire's office was smaller than Nathan expected. Still nice. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, windows overlooking the city, but it didn't feel like the kind of space designed to intimidate. Papers covered the desk in organized chaos. A coffee mug sat next to a laptop. Photos lined one shelf, most of them showing Claire with her father at various ages. Claire stood when Nathan entered. She'd traded yesterday's business casual for a full suit, and she looked tired in a way that suggested she'd slept about as much as he had. Nathan, thank you for coming. Didn't think I had much choice. She almost smiled. You could have ignored the text, and then you would have just showed up at my maintenance closet. Probably. She gestured to one of the chairs. Sit, please. Nathan sat. Claire moved around the desk but didn't sit herself. Instead, she stood by the window, looking out at the parking lot below. The investors were impressed, she said. Thomas Grayson spent 20 minutes testing the calibration system personally. He said it was the smoothest operation he'd seen in any demonstration this year. He asked who designed it. What did you tell him? That we had an exceptional engineering team. She turned to face him. I didn't mention that our exceptional engineer was wearing a maintenance uniform and almost didn't get to touch the machine because my staff treated him like he was invisible. Nathan said nothing. I pulled your full employment record, Claire continued. Helix Systems, 2014 to 2022. Lead architect on the Meridian project, 12 patents, 3 industry awards. Published in the Journal of Quantum Engineering. You weren't just good, Nathan. You were one of the best. Was the right word. Sense. Why maintenance? Really? I know you said it was about Emma, but there are engineering firms that offer reasonable hours. You could have found something that didn't require you to pretend you were someone else. Nathan leaned back in the chair, because reasonable hours aren't the same as being present. I tried the balanced approach. I worked for a firm that promised I could have both career and family. And you know what happened? Every time Emma needed me, I was in a meeting I couldn't leave. Every time Rachel called because the treatment wasn't working, I was on a deadline. I kept telling myself I'd figure it out, that I'd find the right balance. And then Rachel died, and I realized there was no such thing as balance. There was only choosing what mattered. So you chose Emma. I chose not to miss the rest of her childhood because I was too busy being important. Claire sat down behind her desk. I want to offer you a position, senior engineer, possibly lead architect if you're interested. Salary in the low 6 figures, full benefits, stock options. You'd be working on the kind of projects that actually matter, with resources you didn't have at Helix. Nathan had known this was coming. He'd spent the entire night preparing for it, and yet hearing the words still made his stomach drop. I can't. You haven't heard the details yet. I don't need to hear the details. I spent 3 years building a life where Emma comes first. I pick her up from school. I make her dinner. I help with homework. I show up. That's the job that matters. What if I could guarantee reasonable hours? What if there's no such thing as guaranteed hours in engineering? You know that. Something always goes wrong at 4:55 on a Friday. Some crisis always needs one more hour, one more night, one more weekend. And before you know it, you're missing field trips and bedtimes and the whole reason you took the job in the first place. Claire's expression hardened slightly. So you're just going to spend the rest of your life emptying trash cans? That's the plan? If it means Emma has a father who's actually present, then yes. What about when she's older? What are you going to tell her when she asks why you gave up? Nathan stood. I'll tell her I chose her. Thanks for the offer, but I'm not interested. He was halfway to the door when Claire spoke again. My father died in this office. Nathan stopped. Heart attack, Claire said quietly. He was working late, reviewing contracts for an acquisition that couldn't wait until Monday. I was supposed to meet him for dinner. He texted me that he'd be another hour, that I should go ahead and eat without him. By the time I got here, the paramedics were already taking him out on a stretcher. She paused. He spent 30 years building this company, missed every school play, every graduation, every moment that mattered because there was always something more urgent. And in the end, he died alone in an office, working on a deal that didn't even go through. Nathan turned around. Claire was staring at her desk, her hands flat against the wood. I don't want to be him, she said. I don't want to build something so big that it crushes everything else, but I also don't know how to run this company without becoming exactly what he was. And yesterday, watching you fix that machine, I kept thinking, here's someone who figured it out, someone who walked away and survived. I didn't figure anything out. I just made a choice. So help me make better choices. Work here. Show me how to build a company that doesn't require people to sacrifice their families. She met his eyes. I'm not asking you to become what you were. I'm asking you to help me build something different. Durs. Nathan wanted to say no. He wanted to walk out and go back to his maintenance closet and forget this conversation ever happened. But something in Claire's expression stopped him. Not the desperation, but the honesty. She wasn't trying to manipulate him. She was asking for help. I need to think about it, he said finally. Fair enough. But Nathan, whatever you decide, thank you for last night. You saved us when you didn't have to. Nathan nodded and left before she could say anything else. He made it to the elevator before his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Cole? This is Richard Voss. We need to talk. Nathan's jaw tightened. About what? Your conversation with Miss Bennett. I understand she made you an offer. How do you... I'm the CFO. It's my job to know these things. I'd like to meet with you. Today, if possible. I'm working. I'll make it worth your time. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks from the building. Brew Point. Meet me there in 20 minutes. Voss hung up before Nathan could respond. Nathan stood in the elevator, his finger hovering over the button for the ground floor. Every instinct told him to skip the meeting, to go back to work and let whatever was happening at the executive level stay at the executive level. But Voss had called him directly, which meant this wasn't just about a job offer. Nathan pressed the button. Brew Point was the kind of place that served $8 lattes and had reclaimed wood tables. Richard Voss sat in the back corner wearing a suit that probably cost more than Nathan's truck, his laptop open in front of him. He stood when Nathan approached. Thank you for coming. I've got 30 minutes before my shift. Then I'll be brief. Voss gestured to the chair across from him. Claire offered you a position. Are you taking it? I haven't decided. Let me help you decide. Don't. Nathan blinked. Excuse me? I've been with Orion Dynamics for 28 years. I watched James build this company from nothing, and I watched Claire inherit it 2 years ago with absolutely no preparation for what it takes to run an operation this size. She's brilliant, don't misunderstand me, but she's also desperate to prove she deserves her father's legacy, which makes her reckless. What does this have to do with me? Voss leaned forward. Yesterday, in the middle of a crisis, she put the entire company's future in the hands of a maintenance worker because he claimed to be an engineer. She gambled $80 million on your word. Do you understand how insane that is? It worked. This time. But what happens next time she makes an impulsive decision based on instinct instead of process? What happens when she hires someone who can't deliver? So, he paused. You're good at what you do. I read your file. 12 patents, impressive track record. But you left the industry for a reason, and Claire bringing you back isn't going to fix whatever problems she's trying to solve. Nathan stood. Is that all? I'm offering you an alternative. Consulting work. Contract basis. You come in when we need you, handle specific problems, get paid extremely well, and go home to your daughter. No full-time commitment, no expectations beyond the project at hand. Why? Because I'd rather have you working for me than for Claire. She's too emotional, too invested in proving she can save everyone. I need people who show up, do the work, and don't get tangled up in the company's drama. Nathan looked at Voss for a long moment. The man was calculating, precise, every word chosen carefully. Nathan had worked with people like this before. People who saw employees as assets to be managed, not human beings with lives outside the building. Thanks for the offer, Nathan said, but I'm not interested in being anyone's insurance policy. He left before Voss could respond. By the time Nathan got back to Orion Dynamics, his 30-minute absence had turned into 45, and Eric was covering his maintenance rounds. Nathan found him on the second floor, replacing a flickering light fixture. You okay? Eric asked. You look stressed. Long morning. I heard about last night. The whole building's talking about it. Maintenance guy saves the company. Very dramatic. Eric grinned. You're like a superhero with a mop. I'm really not. So what happens now? Do you get promoted or something? Nathan picked up his toolbox. I don't know yet. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Nathan cleaned floors, replaced air filters, fixed a jammed door on the fourth floor, and tried not to think about the two conversations he'd had that morning. But by 3 o'clock, when he was supposed to be checking HVAC systems in the basement, he found himself standing outside Lab C instead. The door was open. Inside, David Park worked at the main console, running what looked like routine diagnostics. He glanced up when Nathan appeared in the doorway. "Can I help you?" "Just checking the system, making sure everything's stable." David's expression was unreadable. "It's stable. Diagnostics are clean. Whatever you did last night, it held." Nathan stepped into the lab. The calibration system hummed quietly, all its indicators green. It looked exactly like it had when he'd first worked on machines like this. Elegant, precise, beautiful in the way that complex engineering could be beautiful. "I owe you an apology," David said. Nathan turned, surprised. "I was an ass," David continued. "I treated you like you didn't know anything because I couldn't imagine a scenario where the maintenance guy was smarter than me. That was wrong." Boom. "You weren't entirely wrong. I am the maintenance guy." "Yeah, but you're also the guy who saved the demo when I was ready to give up. So, thanks." David paused. "Are you coming back? To engineering?" "I don't know." "For what it's worth, I hope you do. We could use someone who actually knows what they're doing." Nathan almost laughed. "You seem like you know what you're doing, Shane. I can run diagnostics and follow protocols. You can hear a machine failing before the computer even registers a problem. That's not the same thing." After Nathan left the lab, he went back to the basement and actually checked the HVAC systems like he was supposed to. Then he finished his shift, clocked out, and drove to Emma's school. She ran to him across the parking lot, her backpack bouncing, and Nathan caught her like he always did. "How was your day?" he asked. "Good. We learned about fractions. I don't like fractions." "Nobody likes fractions." "Do you like fractions?" "I use them for work sometimes." Emma pulled back to look at him. "See? You are smart, even with the fractions." "What?" They drove home and Nathan made spaghetti while Emma did homework at the kitchen table. She asked him to check her math, and he did, and when he found a mistake, she groaned and erased it dramatically. They ate dinner together, watching an episode of the nature documentary they'd started, and when Emma fell asleep on the couch halfway through, Nathan carried her to bed. He stood in her doorway longer than usual, watching her sleep, trying to picture what life would look like if he took Claire's offer. More money, which would mean a better house, maybe even saving for Emma's college. More interesting work, which would mean he'd stop feeling like his brain was slowly atrophying from disuse. But also more hours, more stress, more nights like last night where he'd left Emma with a babysitter because something at work couldn't wait. Rachel would have known what to do. Rachel always knew. But Rachel wasn't here, and Nathan had to figure it out alone. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Have you thought about the offer?" Nathan stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back. "Still thinking." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Take your time." "But for what it's worth, I meant what I said. I want to build something different. I think you could help." Nathan set down his phone and went to bed. He didn't sleep well. His dreams were full of machines failing and Emma asking questions he didn't know how to answer. The next morning, Nathan was halfway through his coffee when someone knocked on the front door. He checked the time, 7:15, too early for a delivery, too late for anyone with good news, and opened the door to find David Park standing on his porch. "How did you find my address?" David looked uncomfortable. "Employee directory. Sorry, I know this is weird, but I need to talk to you and I didn't want to do it at the office." Nathan glanced back at the kitchen, where Emma was eating cereal and watching cartoons. "Give me a minute." He stepped outside and closed the door behind him. "What's going on?" "The board is meeting today. They're deciding whether to approve Claire's restructuring plan, and part of that plan includes hiring you as senior engineer. Richard Voss is pushing back hard. He thinks Claire's making emotional decisions instead of practical ones. Why are you telling me this? Because if Voss kills the restructuring plan, Claire's going to lose support. And if she loses support, the board might push her out entirely, replace her with someone more—" David paused, searching for the word. "Someone more like her father. And you think I can stop that? I think if you publicly accept the position, it gives Claire credibility. It shows the board she's making smart hires, that she's building a team worth investing in." Nathan leaned against the porch railing. You're asking me to take the job to save her. I'm asking you to take the job because you're good at it and we need you. The fact that it also helps Claire is a bonus. What if I don't want to be anyone's political strategy? David ran a hand through his hair. Look, I get it. You have a life outside the company. You have a daughter. But Claire's trying to do something real here. She's trying to change the way this place operates so people like you don't have to choose between being a good engineer and being a good parent. Isn't that worth something? Nathan didn't answer. Behind him, through the window, he could hear Emma laughing at something on TV. The meeting's at 11, David said. If you're going to do this, you should probably decide soon. He left before Nathan could respond. Nathan went back inside. Emma looked up from her cereal. Who was that? Someone from work. Did you get in trouble? No, they want me to do something, and I'm trying to figure out if I should. Emma considered this. Is it a big thing or a little thing? A big thing. Will it make you happy? Nathan sat down beside her. I don't know. Maybe. It's complicated. Mom used to say complicated things are just big things made out of lots of little things. You just have to figure out which little thing to do first. Nathan looked at his daughter, this 6-year-old person who somehow understood the world better than he did. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice more now. After Nathan dropped Emma at school, he drove to Orion Dynamics and went straight to the 5th floor. Jason looked surprised when Nathan stepped out of the elevator. Is Claire in? She's preparing for a board meeting. I need 2 minutes. Jason hesitated, then picked up his phone. A moment later, Claire appeared in her doorway. She looked tense, her jacket already on, a folder of documents in her hand. Nathan, I'm about to... I'll take the job. Claire stopped. What? The position. Senior engineer. I'll take it. On one condition. Which is, I pick Emma up from school every day at 4:30. No exceptions. If there's a crisis, someone else handles it. If there's a deadline, I meet it during normal hours or it waits. Emma comes first, and that's not negotiable. Claire set down the folder. Done. And I want it in writing. Contract clause. Not just a verbal promise. You'll have it by Monday. Nathan nodded. Then I guess I'm an engineer again. For the first time since he'd met her, Claire actually smiled. Not the professional smile she used in meetings, but a real one that made her look younger and less exhausted. Thank you, she said. I know this wasn't easy. It's still not easy, but maybe it's the right kind of hard. Claire glanced at her watch. I need to get to the board meeting. Are you okay if I mention you've accepted the position? That's why I'm here. She picked up the folder again, then paused. Nathan, for what it's worth, I think Emma's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. After Claire left, Nathan stood in the hallway for a moment, his heart pounding. He'd just upended his entire life in the span of 2 minutes, and he had no idea if it was the right decision or the biggest mistake he'd made since Rachel's funeral. His phone buzzed, a text from Eric. Did you quit? Someone said you were on the 5th floor looking official. Nathan typed back. Not exactly. He went back to the maintenance closet, gathered his tools, and finished his shift. At 4:30, he picked up Emma from school. She ran to him like always, and Nathan caught her like always, and when she asked how his day was, he said it was complicated but okay. Did you figure out the big thing? Emma asked. I think so. Good, because I don't want you to be worried anymore. That night, after Emma was asleep, Nathan sat on the couch with a beer he didn't really want and thought about Rachel. She would have had opinions about this, strong ones. She would have asked him if he was sure, if he'd really thought it through, if he was prepared for what came next. And then, when he admitted he wasn't sure, she would have told him that nobody ever is. His phone buzzed, a text from Claire. Board approved the restructuring plan. You start Monday. Welcome back. Nathan stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then he finished his beer, checked on Emma one more time, and went to bed. Tomorrow he'd start figuring out what being an engineer and a father at the same time actually looked like. Tomorrow he'd start navigating a world he'd spent 3 years running from. But tonight, he'd done the hardest part. He'd chosen to try. Monday morning arrived too fast. Nathan stood in front of his closet at 6:30, staring at shirts he hadn't worn in 3 years, and felt like an imposter. The button-downs didn't fit right anymore, too tight in the shoulders from the physical work he'd been doing, too loose in the waist because he'd lost weight after Rachel died and never gained it back. He settled on a blue shirt that was wrinkled but clean and khakis that Emma said made him look like a teacher. "You look fancy," Emma said from the doorway, already dressed for school in leggings and a shirt with a cat on it. "I look uncomfortable." Same thing. She walked over and straightened his collar, standing on her tiptoes to reach. "Mom used to do this." Nathan's throat tightened. "I know. So she'd tell you that you look handsome, and you'd say she was lying, and she'd get mad." "I never said she was lying. You said she needed glasses." Emma stepped back, examining her work. "You do look handsome, though, even without Mom here to make you believe it." They ate breakfast in near silence, both of them processing the change in routine. At 7:45, Nathan dropped Emma at school and watched her run toward the building without looking back. No hesitation, no fear. Just complete confidence that he'd be there to pick her up later, like always. Nathan drove to Orion Dynamics and parked in a visitor spot because he didn't have an assigned space yet. The building looked the same as it had on Friday, but walking through the main entrance in business casual instead of a maintenance uniform made everything feel foreign. The woman at the reception desk didn't recognize him. "Can I help you?" "Nathan Cole, I'm starting today, engineering department." She checked her computer, then printed a temporary badge. "Fifth floor. Someone from HR will meet you." The elevator ride felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, Jason was waiting with a woman in her 50s wearing a blazer and carrying a tablet. "Nathan, this is Margaret from HR. She'll handle your onboarding." Margaret extended her hand. "Welcome back to the professional world. I understand you've been with us for 3 years in a different capacity." "Maintenance." "Well, congratulations on the promotion. Let's get you set up." The next 2 hours were a blur of paperwork, system access requests, badge photos, and benefit elections. Margaret walked him through health insurance options, retirement contributions, and vacation policies, and Nathan signed documents without fully processing what they said. His brain kept catching on small details. The way Margaret called it a career transition instead of what it actually was. The fact that his new salary was 3 times what he'd been making in maintenance. The computer login credentials that would give him access to systems he'd spent 3 years pretending not to understand. At 10:30, Margaret led him to the engineering wing. The space was open concept, filled with workstations and collaboration areas, glass-walled offices along the perimeter. David Park stood near the center, talking with 2 other engineers Nathan didn't recognize. When he saw Nathan, his face broke into a genuine smile. He actually showed up. "Did you think I'd bail?" "Little bit, yeah." David gestured to the others. "This is Anita and Marcus. They're on the quantum systems team. You'll be working with them on the next phase of the calibration project." Anita was maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and paint stains on her jeans. Marcus looked younger, fresh out of grad school, wearing a company polo and trying too hard to look confident. They both stared at Nathan like he was a puzzle they couldn't solve. "You're the maintenance guy," Marcus said. "Was the maintenance guy." "David said you used to work at Helix on the Meridian project." "That's right. So you just stopped? For 3 years?" Nathan's jaw tightened. Personal reasons. Anita jumped in before Marcus could push further. "We're glad you're here. The calibration system's been stable since the demo, but we're starting preliminary work on the next generation. David said you might have ideas." "I might." David handed Nathan a tablet. "Your workstation's over there by the window. Access credentials should be active. Let me know if you need anything." Nathan took the tablet and walked to the desk David had indicated. It was clean, empty, waiting for him to fill it with whatever came next. He sat down, logged into the system, and pulled up the project files for the next generation calibration architecture. The data was dense, complex, exactly the kind of problem he used to love solving. He read through the specifications, the preliminary designs, the notes from previous engineering reviews. His brain started organizing the information automatically, identifying inefficiencies, spotting places where the design could be optimized. It felt like remembering how to speak after years of silence. "Nathan? Oteim. Mochi-eats." He looked up. Claire stood beside his desk, holding a coffee cup and looking less polished than she had during their previous conversations. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and she wasn't wearing a jacket. "How's the first day?" "Overwhelming." "That's normal." She set the coffee cup on his desk. "Thought you might need this." David said you've been reading project files for an hour straight without moving. Nathan picked up the cup. The coffee was black, no sugar, exactly how he drank it. How did you know? I asked Eric for maintenance. He said you always made it the same way in the break room. Nathan took a sip. It was still hot, better quality than the break room coffee. Thanks. Claire pulled over a chair and sat down. Around them, the engineering floor hummed with activity, but nobody seemed to pay attention to their conversation. I wanted to check in, make sure you're not regretting this already. Ask me again in a week. Fair enough. She paused. The board meeting on Friday went better than expected. Richard wasn't happy about hiring you, but he couldn't argue with the results from the demo. You've got support from most of the senior leadership. Most? Barry Sissy sets. Voss is still skeptical. He thinks I'm building a team based on loyalty instead of qualifications. Am I not qualified? You're overqualified. That's not the point. He thinks I'm trying to surround myself with people who owe me something, and he's waiting for that strategy to backfire. Nathan set down the coffee. Is he wrong? Yes, he's seeing. Claire met his eyes. I offered you this job because you're brilliant, and you saved the company. If you happen to also believe in what I'm trying to build here, that's a bonus. But I'm not asking for loyalty. I'm asking for honesty. Then honestly, I have no idea if I can do this. It's been 3 years since I worked on anything this complex, and I spent those 3 years deliberately not thinking about engineering so I wouldn't miss it. Now I'm supposed to just flip a switch and become that person again, except I'm not that person anymore. I'm someone's father first, and I don't know how to be both things at the same time. Then figure it out as you go. Make mistakes. Ask for help. Nobody expects you to have all the answers on day one. Voss probably does. Voss expects everyone to fail so he can be right about them. Don't give him the satisfaction. After Claire left, Nathan returned to the project files. At noon, Anita stopped by his desk and asked if he wanted to grab lunch with the team. Nathan almost said no. He'd spent 3 years eating alone in his maintenance closet, and the idea of making small talk with strangers felt exhausting. But Anita was waiting, and everyone else was already heading toward the elevator, so Nathan grabbed his wallet and followed. They went to a sandwich shop 2 blocks away. Marcus talked too much about his thesis project. Anita asked Nathan careful questions about Helix that suggested she'd done research on him. David mostly listened, jumping in when the conversation lagged. Nathan answered what he could and deflected the rest. And by the time they returned to the office, he felt drained in a way that had nothing to do with the work. The afternoon passed faster. Nathan started sketching design modifications for the calibration system, testing ideas on paper before committing them to the simulation software. It was slow going. His hands remembered the equations before his brain caught up, and he kept second-guessing himself, deleting work and starting over. But by 4 o'clock, he had something that might actually improve the system's efficiency by 12%. At 4:15, Nathan saved his work and shut down his computer. Anita looked up from her workstation. Leaving already? I pick up my daughter at 4:30. Every day? Every day. Marcus glanced at David, who just shrugged. Nathan grabbed his bag and headed for the elevator, his heart pounding harder than it should have been. This was the test. This was where he'd find out if Claire's promise meant anything, or if he'd just traded one impossible situation for another. Nobody stopped him. Nathan made it to Emma's school with 3 minutes to spare. She ran to him across the parking lot, her backpack bouncing, and Nathan caught her like he'd been doing it his whole life. How was work? Emma asked. Different. Good different or bad different? Still figuring that out. That night, after dinner and homework and the bedtime routine that had become their shared ritual, Nathan sat on the couch with his laptop and reviewed the design work he'd started earlier. Emma's drawing still hung on the wall above his makeshift workspace, the two of them holding hands under a sun she'd colored orange and yellow and pink. He stared at it for a long time, then opened a new document and started writing down every modification he could think of for the calibration system. He worked until midnight. When he finally went to bed, his brain was buzzing with equations and design parameters, and he couldn't tell if it felt good or terrifying. The next 3 weeks fell into a rhythm that was almost comfortable. Nathan arrived at the office by 8, worked until 4:15, and picked up Emma from school without fail. The engineering team adjusted to his schedule. learning not to schedule late meetings or expect him to stay for after-hours discussions. Some of them seemed annoyed by the boundary. Most of them just accepted it. The work itself came back faster than Nathan expected. His designs for the next-generation calibration system were elegant, efficient, exactly the kind of innovation Orion Dynamics needed to stay competitive. David presented them to Claire in a project review meeting, and she approved the prototype development without hesitation. Within 2 weeks, Nathan was leading a team of 4 engineers, including Anita and Marcus, working to build the first functional model. But the boundary between work and home was thinner than Nathan wanted to admit. He found himself thinking about engineering problems during dinner, sketching designs on napkins while Emma did homework, waking up at 3 in the morning with solutions to issues he'd been stuck on all day. The work was consuming him again, the way it always had, and the only difference was that now he was better at hiding it. Emma noticed anyway. "You're doing the face again," she said one night while they were eating tacos at the kitchen table. Nathan looked up. "What face?" "The thinking too hard face. You've been doing it a lot." "I'm just working on a problem." "Is it a big problem?" "Kind of." Emma took a bite of her taco, cheese dripping onto her plate. "Do you like your job?" "I think so. Why?" "You seem worried more now than before, Sihat." Nathan set down his food. "I'm not worried. I'm just adjusting. It's different than what I was doing before." "Do you miss being maintenance?" The question caught Nathan off guard. He'd expected Emma to be happy about the change, proud that her father was doing something important again. Instead, she looked concerned, like she could sense the shift happening inside him, and wasn't sure it was good. "Sometimes," Nathan admitted, "maintenance was simpler. I knew what I was supposed to do, and when I was done, I was done. This new job is harder to turn off." "Well, then maybe you should tell them to turn it down." "Turn what down?" "The job. Like when I ask you to turn down the TV because it's too loud." "Maybe your job is too loud right now." Nathan almost laughed. "I don't think it works that way." "Why not? You're the smart one. You should get to decide how loud things are." After Emma went to bed, Nathan sat on the couch and thought about what she'd said. The job was too loud. The problems were bleeding into every corner of his life, and he was letting them because part of him had missed this, the complexity, the challenge, the feeling of being good at something that mattered. But Emma was right. If he didn't figure out how to turn down the volume, he'd end up exactly where he'd been 3 years ago, drowning in work and losing the person who mattered most. The next morning, Nathan arrived at the office to find Richard Voss waiting at his desk. The CFO looked uncomfortable standing in the engineering wing, like he'd wandered into foreign territory and wasn't sure of the protocol. "Mr. Cole, do you have a moment?" Nathan set down his bag. "I guess." "Walk with me." They took the stairs to the 5th floor. Voss moved with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades navigating corporate buildings, and Nathan followed, trying to figure out what this was about. When they reached Voss's office, the CFO closed the door and gestured to a chair. "I'll be direct. Claire's making decisions that concern me, and you're at the center of several of them." Nathan sat. "What kind of decisions?" "She's restructuring the engineering department around your designs. She's allocated $3 million to prototype development based on preliminary work you've done in less than a month. She's talking about expanding the quantum systems division and putting you in charge of it. And that's a problem because you've been back for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And she's betting the company's future on someone who spent the last 3 years mopping floors." Voss leaned forward. "I don't doubt your technical abilities. Your work speaks for itself. But Claire is building a castle on sand, and when it collapses, Orion Dynamics collapses with it. What do you want from me?" I want you to be realistic about your limitations. You've been out of the industry for 3 years. Technology evolves fast. Your knowledge base is outdated, your network is gone, and you're working reduced hours because of personal obligations. Those are significant handicaps." Nathan's jaw tightened. "I'm meeting every deadline. My designs are solid. What exactly am I failing at?" "You're not failing yet, but you will. Everyone does when they're stretched too thin, and when you fail, Claire will defend you because she's emotionally invested in proving her hiring decision was right. That loyalty will blind her to problems until it's too late. So what, you want me to quit?" "But I want you to recognize that Claire needs someone who'll tell her the truth, not someone who'll validate her impulses. If you care about this company, or about her, You'll push back when her decisions are reckless instead of just executing whatever she asks. Voss stood, signaling the conversation was over. Nathan left the office feeling like he'd been in a fight he hadn't known he was having. When he got back to his desk, David was waiting. What did Voss want? To remind me I'm not good enough. He's an asshole. He's not wrong, though. I have been out of the industry for 3 years. My knowledge is outdated. David shook his head. Your knowledge is fine. Voss just hates that Claire made a decision without consulting him first. He's been trying to control her since her father died, and every time she does something independently, he panics. Is he right about her taking risks? Right. Probably, but that's what makes her different from her father. James Bennett never took risks. He only made moves after calculating every possible outcome. Claire's willing to bet on people. Sometimes that's going to backfire. Doesn't mean it's wrong. Nathan spent the rest of the morning distracted, Voss's words cycling through his head. At lunch, instead of joining the team, he took a walk around the building and called Mrs. Chen. Is Emma okay? She's fine, Nathan. Why? I just wanted to check in. Make sure the new schedule isn't causing problems. The schedule is the same as before. You're still picking her up every day. I know. Nathan stopped walking. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Taking this job? Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment. Are you asking if Emma's okay with it, or if you're okay with it? Both. Emma's proud of you. She tells everyone her father is a genius engineer, but she also watches you more carefully now. She's checking to make sure you're still there. I am still there. I know. But she remembers what you were like before her mother died. She's making sure you don't disappear again. Bye. After Nathan hung up, he stood in the parking lot and tried to breathe through the tightness in his chest. Emma was 6 years old and already carrying the weight of his past mistakes, already measuring his presence against his absence, already preparing for the possibility that he'd choose work over her. He couldn't let that happen. Not again. That afternoon, Nathan finished his design work by 3:30 and spent the last 45 minutes of his day documenting everything so the team could continue without him if needed. At 4:15, he shut down his computer and left, ignoring the unfinished tasks that whispered at the edges of his mind. Emma ran to him in the parking lot, and Nathan caught her and held on a little longer than usual. You okay, Daddy? Yeah, trouble. I'm okay. That night, they made pizza together, and Emma insisted on adding pineapple, even though Nathan said it was weird. They ate on the couch, watching a movie about talking animals, and when Emma fell asleep halfway through, Nathan carried her to bed and tucked her in. He stood in the doorway, watching her breathe, and made himself a promise. Whatever happened at Orion Dynamics, whatever designs needed finishing, whatever crises emerged, none of it would matter more than this. None of it would be worth losing her. The next day, Claire called an emergency meeting. Nathan arrived in the conference room to find the entire engineering leadership team already assembled, along with Richard Voss and 2 board members Nathan didn't recognize. Claire stood at the head of the table, her expression tight. We have a problem. Quantum Forge just announced a new calibration system. It launches in 3 months, and preliminary reports suggest it's faster and more efficient than anything currently on the market. David swore under his breath. How much faster? 20% efficiency gain over our current system. If they deliver on that promise, we lose our competitive advantage entirely. The room erupted in overlapping conversations. Nathan stayed quiet, his mind already working through the implications. Quantum Forge was one of the biggest players in the industry, with resources and personnel that dwarfed Orion Dynamics. If they'd developed a superior system, Orion's investors would pull funding and the company would collapse within a year. Voss's voice cut through the noise. We need to accelerate our next generation development, push the prototype to completion, and launch before Quantum Forge. The prototype isn't ready, David said. We're still in early testing. Then make it ready. We're talking months of work, not weeks. We don't have months. Everyone started talking at once, and Claire let it go on for 30 seconds before slamming her hand on the table. The room went silent. Enough. Nathan, how long until the prototype is functional? Nathan met her eyes across the table. If we cut corners and skip proper testing, 6 weeks, maybe 8, but it won't be reliable. It'll crash in a real-world demonstration just like the last system almost did. And if we do it right, 4 months minimum, possibly longer. Voss leaned forward. That's too long. Quantum Forge will own the market by then. Yet, Mama Kumbom. Then we'll own a rushed, broken system that destroys our reputation. Nathan shot back. You want to beat Quantum Forge? Fine. But not by sacrificing quality. We do it right, or we don't do it at all. That's not your decision to make. It's the only decision that makes sense. The room descended into argument again, everyone shouting over each other, and Nathan felt the familiar pressure building in his chest. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of. Impossible deadlines, corners getting cut, the work consuming everything until there was nothing left but the crisis. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma's school. Emma fell on the playground. She's okay, but asking for you. Nathan stood. I have to go. Claire looked up. What? Nathan, we're in the middle of... My daughter's hurt. I'm leaving. It's 2:30. Can't you... No. Nathan grabbed his bag. I'll be back tomorrow. Figure out what you want to do about Quantum Forge. But don't ask me to build something broken just because you're scared. He left before anyone could respond. The drive to Emma's school took 12 minutes, and Nathan spent all of them trying to calm the panic rising in his throat. When he arrived, the school nurse met him at the entrance. She's fine. Just scraped her knee pretty badly. We cleaned it up, but she wanted you. Emma sat in the nurse's office with a bandage on her knee and tear tracks on her face. When she saw Nathan, she started crying again. Hey, Trouble, you're okay. It hurts. I know. Let's get you home. He carried her to the truck, even though she was probably too big for it, and she wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder. Nathan held her tight and thought about the meeting he'd just walked out of, the expressions on everyone's faces when he'd left, and he didn't regret it for a second. That night, after Emma was asleep and her knee was properly bandaged, Nathan's phone rang. Claire. Before you say anything, Nathan said, I'm not apologizing. I'm not asking you to. I'm calling to tell you that you were right about the prototype, about not cutting corners. I told the team we're doing it properly, even if it takes 4 months. Nathan sat down. What did Voss say? That I'm making emotional decisions and destroying the company. Same thing he always says. She paused. Is Emma okay? Scraped knee. She'll be fine. Good. And Nathan? I meant what I said when I hired you. Emma comes first, always. Don't ever apologize for that. Bots. After they hung up, Nathan sat in the dark living room and tried to figure out how he felt. Relieved, maybe. Exhausted, definitely. But underneath it all, there was something else. A small flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd found a place where he could be both things at once. A good engineer and a good father. It wouldn't be easy. It might not even be possible. But for the first time in 3 years, Nathan thought it might be worth trying. The next 8 weeks were brutal. Nathan worked longer hours than he wanted to admit, arriving at 7 in the morning and leaving at 4:15 sharp, then spending evenings after Emma went to bed reviewing design specifications and running simulations on his laptop. The prototype development consumed the engineering team, every day bringing new challenges that required solutions nobody had anticipated. The quantum array kept destabilizing during high-load testing. The resonance couplers were generating heat signatures that suggested they'd fail within 6 months of continuous operation. The calibration algorithms worked perfectly in simulation, but crashed when applied to physical hardware. Nathan fixed problems as fast as they appeared, but each solution revealed 3 more issues underneath. It was like trying to build a house while the foundation kept shifting, and he could feel the pressure mounting from every direction. David looked exhausted all the time. Anita stopped eating lunch. Marcus started making mistakes in his code that he never would have made under normal circumstances. And Claire kept asking for progress updates that Nathan couldn't give her because progress was measured in inches when everyone wanted miles. Emma noticed the change immediately. Nathan tried to hide it, tried to be present during their time together, but she could read him better than anyone. She'd ask about his day and he'd say it was fine, and she'd look at him with an expression that said she knew he was lying but wouldn't push. At night, when he thought she was asleep, he'd hear her crying softly in her room, and he'd go sit on the edge of her bed until she calmed down. Are you going to leave? She asked one night, her voice small in the darkness. Nathan's chest tightened. I'm right here, Trouble. I mean like before, when Mom was sick. You were there, but you weren't really there. That's not going to happen. You promise? Nathan wanted to promise. He wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, that he'd figured out how to balance work and family, that she'd never have to worry about losing him the way she'd lost Rachel. But promises were dangerous when you weren't sure you could keep them. "I'm trying," he said instead. "I'm trying really hard not to let work take over, but sometimes it's difficult, and I don't always get it right. I don't want you to be sad all the time." "I'm not sad." "You look sad, like you're thinking about Mom." Nathan brushed her hair back from her face. "I think about Mom a lot, but that's not what makes me sad. What makes me sad is worrying that I'm not doing a good enough job taking care of you. You're doing good. You're here every day. Being here isn't the same as being present." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mom told me once that you were the smartest person she ever met, but sometimes you thought too much about the wrong things." "When did she tell you that?" "Before she died. When you weren't home yet, and I asked where you were. She said you were solving big problems, but forgetting about the small ones right in front of you." Nathan felt something crack inside his chest. She was right. "Are you forgetting about me?" "Never. Not for a second." "Then why does it feel like you are?" Nathan didn't have an answer that would make sense to a 6-year-old. Hell, he didn't have an answer that made sense to himself. So he just held her until she fell asleep, and then he sat in her doorway for an hour watching her breathe and hating himself for making her worry. The next morning, Nathan arrived at the office to find Richard Voss waiting in the engineering wing. Again. The CFO had made it a habit to show up unannounced, asking pointed questions about timelines and budgets, his presence a constant reminder that someone was keeping score of Nathan's failures. "We need to talk," Voss said without preamble. Nathan set down his bag. "I'm busy. The board is meeting next week. They want a demonstration of the prototype." "Look, it's not ready for demonstration." "It's been 8 weeks. How much longer do you need?" "However long it takes to build it right." Voss's expression hardened. "Quantum Forge launches in 4 weeks. We're out of time." "Then we're out of time. I'm not demonstrating a system that's going to fail." "That's not your decision." "It's absolutely my decision. I'm the lead engineer. If I say the system isn't ready, it isn't ready. And if I say you're fired for insubordination, Nathan met Voss's eyes. "Then you're down a lead engineer and the prototype definitely won't get finished. Your call." They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Voss turned and walked away without another word. Nathan's hands were shaking. He sat down at his desk and tried to focus on the work in front of him. But his mind kept replaying the conversation, wondering if he'd just ended his career for the second time in 3 years. David appeared at his desk 20 minutes later. "Voss just went into Claire's office. He looked pissed." "Good. What did you do?" "Told him the truth. The prototype isn't ready, and I'm not going to pretend it is just because we're on a deadline. He's going to try to get you fired. Probably. And you're okay with that?" "Molotzi." Nathan looked at David. "I spent 3 years learning that some things are more important than keeping a job. My integrity is one of them. If Voss wants me gone because I won't lie for him, then I don't want to be here anyway." David sat down in the chair beside Nathan's desk. "You know Claire's going to back you, right? She's not going to let Voss push you out." "She might not have a choice. The board listens to him." "The board also knows you saved the company during the investor demo. You've got more credibility than you think." Nathan wasn't convinced, but he appreciated David trying. The rest of the morning passed in tense silence. Nathan worked on the calibration algorithms, made incremental progress, and tried not to think about the fact that his job might be over by lunch. At noon, Claire called him to her office. Nathan took the elevator to the 5th floor, his heart pounding harder than it should have been. Jason waved him through without a word, which Nathan took as a bad sign. Inside Claire's office, she sat behind her desk with her hands folded, her expression unreadable. "Richard says you refused to demonstrate the prototype for the board." "That's correct. He also says you were insubordinate and suggested the company should miss the Quantum Forge deadline rather than rush the development." "Also correct." Claire leaned back in her chair. "He wants me to fire you." Nathan's stomach dropped, but he kept his voice steady. "Are you going to? Should I?" "That depends on what kind of company you want to run. If you want to build things that work, that last, that actually solve problems, then no. But if you want to chase every competitor, cut every corner, and sacrifice quality for speed, then yeah, you should probably fire me, because I'm not going to help you do that." Nut. Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Richard thinks I'm too soft." That I let personal feelings cloud my judgment. Do you? Sometimes. Maybe. I don't know. She stood and walked to the window. My father would have fired you already. He didn't tolerate anyone who challenged his timeline or questioned his decisions. That's how he built this company, through absolute control and zero tolerance for dissent. And how did that work out for him? Claire turned. He died alone in his office, still trying to control things he should have delegated years earlier, so not great. Then don't be him. Richard says you're holding the company hostage, that you're using your position to force decisions that benefit you personally rather than the business. Nathan stood. I'm trying to keep us from launching a broken product that'll destroy our reputation. If that's holding the company hostage, then guilty as charged. The board meets in 5 days. They're expecting to see progress. Then show them what we have. Show them the designs, the simulations, the test results. Show them we're building something revolutionary, not just something fast. If they can't see the difference, then they don't deserve to run this company. That's easy to say when you're not the one facing the board. I'll face them with you. Put me in the room. Let me explain why we need more time. For this, Claire looked at him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Why are you fighting so hard for this? Because I've already built things the wrong way. I've already sacrificed what mattered for what seemed urgent, and I'm not doing it again. Even if it costs you your job? Especially if it cost me my job. Claire walked back to her desk and sat down. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the most stubborn. Probably both. She almost smiled. The board meets Monday at 10. Be ready to present. And Nathan? Don't make me regret backing you on this. Nathan left her office feeling like he'd just survived a car crash. His hands were still shaking when he got back to his desk. David looked up from his workstation. Still employed? For now, I'm presenting to the board on Monday. Seriously? For now, I'm presenting to... Claire thinks they need to hear why we're not rushing the prototype. They're going to eat you alive. Well, probably. Nathan spent the rest of the week preparing for the presentation. He compiled every piece of data that supported his argument, built simulations that demonstrated why cutting corners would lead to system failure, and rehearsed his talking points until he could deliver them in his sleep. Emma asked why he was working so late every night, and Nathan told her he had something important coming up at work. She asked if he was going to get in trouble, and Nathan said maybe, but that it was the right kind of trouble. There's a right kind of trouble? Emma asked. The kind where you stand up for what you believe in, even when it's hard. Like when I told Owen that you were smart? Exactly like that. Emma seemed satisfied with that answer. On Sunday night, she helped Nathan pick out a tie for the board meeting, choosing a blue one that she said made him look professional. They ate dinner together, watched part of a movie, and when Emma fell asleep on the couch, Nathan carried her to bed and stood in her doorway longer than usual. I'm doing this for you, he whispered into the darkness. I hope you know that. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Nathan dropped Emma at school, drove to Orion Dynamics, and took the elevator to the 5th floor. The board met in a conference room that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Massive table, leather chairs, windows overlooking the city. 9 board members sat around the table, Richard Voss among them, his expression carefully neutral. Claire sat at the head of the table. When Nathan entered, she gestured to the chair beside her. Everyone, this is Nathan Cole, our senior engineer. He's going to walk you through where we are with the next generation prototype. Nathan set up his laptop and connected to the room's display system. His presentation appeared on the screen, clean, professional, backed by data that spoke for itself. He took a breath and started talking. 8 weeks ago, we began development on a calibration system designed to exceed anything currently on the market, including Quantum Forge's upcoming launch. The initial projections suggested we could complete the prototype in 6 weeks. We're now at 8 weeks and the system isn't ready for demonstration. I'm here to explain why that's actually good news. One of the board members, a woman in her 60s with silver hair, leaned forward. How is being behind schedule good news? Because we're not behind schedule. We're on the right schedule. The 6-week timeline was based on cutting corners and accepting a margin of error that would have resulted in system failure within 6 months of deployment. What we're building now will last 5 years minimum, operate at 25% greater efficiency than Quantum Forge's system, and won't require the constant maintenance that makes their architecture expensive to operate long-term. Nathan pulled up a simulation that showed 2 systems running side by side, Orion's prototype and Quantum Forge's announced specifications. The Quantum Forge system ran faster initially, but degraded over time. Orion's system started slower but remained stable, eventually outperforming the competitor by a significant margin. This is a 3-year projection, Nathan continued. In year 1, Quantum Forge looks better. By year 2, we're even. By year 3, anyone who bought their system is looking at major overhauls or replacement. Our system is still running at peak efficiency. Richard Voss spoke up. That's all theoretical. Richard Voss spoke. Quantum Forge could have solved those degradation issues. Mumble respondent, yes, but they haven't. I've reviewed their patent filings and published research. The architecture they're using has fundamental limitations that can't be fixed without a complete redesign. They're counting on customers not realizing that until after they've made the purchase. And you're certain of this? I designed similar systems at Helix. I know exactly where the weaknesses are. Another board member, younger, wearing an expensive watch, asked, how much longer until the prototype is ready? 8 weeks minimum, possibly 10. Quantum Forge launches in 4 weeks. I know. So we lose market share. Customers buy their system, and by the time ours is ready, they've already committed. Nathan nodded. In the short term, yes. But in the long term, when their systems start failing and ours are still running perfectly, those customers will come back, and they'll never trust Quantum Forge again. That's a gamble. Everything's a gamble. The question is whether you want to gamble on speed or quality. The room fell silent. Nathan could feel everyone calculating, weighing the risks, trying to decide if he was brilliant or delusional. Finally, the woman with silver hair spoke again. What if we launched a limited release? Sell to a small number of customers? Use their feedback to refine the system before full market deployment? Nathan considered it. That could work. We'd need to be transparent about it being an early access program, and we'd need to build in support infrastructure to handle issues as they come up. But it would give us real-world data without overcommitting. Claire jumped in. We could target customers who value long-term reliability over immediate availability. Industrial manufacturers, research institutions, clients who understand that cutting-edge technology requires patience. Richard Voss looked like he wanted to object, but before he could, the woman with silver hair nodded. I like it. It positions us as the premium option while still generating revenue. The rest of the meeting was a blur. Nathan answered questions, defended his projections, and walked the board through technical details that most of them probably didn't fully understand. By the time Claire dismissed him, 90 minutes had passed, and Nathan felt like he'd run a marathon. He waited outside the conference room while the board deliberated. David found him in the hallway. How'd it go? No idea. Did they hate you? Probably. 15 minutes later, Claire emerged. Her expression was unreadable until she got close enough that only Nathan could hear her. They approved the extended timeline. Limited release in 8 weeks, full launch in 16. Richard's pissed, but he's outvoted. But. Nathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. So I'm not fired? Not today. That's something. Claire smiled. You did good in there. The board was impressed, even if they didn't show it. You made them understand that quality matters, and that's not an easy sell in this industry. I just told them the truth. That's exactly why it worked. Nathan returned to his desk, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The crisis wasn't over. They still had 8 weeks of brutal development ahead, but at least now they were building something that would actually work. David, Anita, and Marcus congratulated him, and even some of the other engineers who'd been skeptical of his approach stopped by to say they respected what he'd done. At 4:15, Nathan shut down his computer and left. He picked up Emma from school, and she ran to him like she always did, her backpack bouncing, her face bright with the kind of uncomplicated joy that made everything else feel manageable. Did you get in trouble? She asked. Not this time. Good, because I picked out a really good tie, and it would be sad if you got in trouble anyway. Nathan laughed. It felt good to laugh. The tie definitely helped. That night they made spaghetti together, and Emma insisted on using way too much sauce, and Nathan didn't correct her because what did it matter if dinner was a little messy? They ate on the couch, watching the nature documentary they'd been working through, and when Emma fell asleep before the episode ended, Nathan carried her to bed and tucked her in. He stood in her doorway, watching her sleep, and thought about how close he'd come to losing this. Not just the job, but the balance, the ability to be present, the promise he'd made to himself and to Emma that work would never consume him the way it had when Rachel was dying. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Thank you for today. You reminded me why I'm doing this." Nathan typed back, "Thank you for letting me." The next 8 weeks were still brutal, but they were different. Nathan worked hard, but he also left on time every day. He solved problems, but he also delegated tasks he would have handled himself in the past. He stayed focused during work hours and present during Emma's time. It wasn't perfect. There were still nights when he woke up at 3 in the morning thinking about the prototype, still moments when he felt stretched too thin, but he was managing. The team rallied around the limited release strategy. They identified 12 potential customers who fit the premium reliability profile and pitched them on the opportunity to be part of something revolutionary. 8 of them agreed, which was enough to justify the development costs and provide the real-world testing data they needed. As the deadline approached, Nathan felt the old pressure building again, but this time he had tools to manage it. When the work felt overwhelming, he'd stop and take a walk around the building. When his mind started racing at night, he'd write down his thoughts, and then close the notebook instead of trying to solve everything immediately. And when Emma asked if he was okay, he told her the truth, that work was stressful, but he was handling it, and she didn't need to worry. "I'm always going to worry a little," Emma said one night while they were cleaning up dinner, "because you're my dad, and that's what kids do. You're 6. You're not supposed to worry about me." "Someone has to. You're not very good at worrying about yourself." Nathan smiled despite himself. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just notice more now." 3 days before the limited release, the prototype finally stabilized. Every system checked out. Every simulation ran clean. The calibration algorithms performed flawlessly under load testing. Nathan ran the final diagnostics himself, triple-checking every measurement, and when everything came back green, he allowed himself to feel something close to relief. Claire came down to the lab that afternoon. She stood beside Nathan at the console, watching the numbers scroll across the screen, and didn't say anything for a long time. "We did it," she finally said. "We did. I wasn't sure we would." "I was." Nathan glanced at her. "You hired the right people and gave them the time to do it right. That's all it took." It took more than that. It took someone willing to fight for quality even when everyone was pushing for speed. She paused. "My father wouldn't have done this. He would have rushed the launch, dealt with the fallout later, and blamed someone else when it failed. You didn't let me make that mistake. I was protecting myself as much as the company. I didn't want to build something I'd be ashamed of. That's what makes you different. You care about the work, not just the outcome." The limited release went live on schedule. 8 customers received their systems, and Nathan spent the next 2 weeks monitoring performance data obsessively. Every metric came back better than projected. The systems ran smoothly, efficiently, exactly as designed. Customer feedback was overwhelmingly positive. And when Quantum Forge's launch happened 2 weeks later, followed almost immediately by reports of system instability and degradation issues, Orion Dynamics looked like the company that had made the smart choice. Orders started coming in. Companies that had initially committed to Quantum Forge reached out to ask about switching to Orion's system. The board authorized full-scale production. Claire appeared in interviews talking about the importance of long-term thinking in a short-term industry. And Nathan found himself being called a visionary, which made him deeply uncomfortable because he'd just been trying not to repeat his past mistakes. One afternoon, about a month after the limited release, Nathan was working at his desk when Emma's school called. Principal Morris again. "Mr. Cole, Emma's fine, but there's been an incident. Can you come in?" Nathan's heart dropped. "What kind of incident?" "It's better if we discuss it in person." Shit. Nathan left immediately, his mind racing through every possible scenario. When he arrived at the school, Emma sat in the principal's office with Owen beside her. Both of them looked guilty. Principal Morris gestured for Nathan to sit. Emma and Owen got into a fight on the playground. "What kind of fight?" "Physical. Emma pushed Owen. He pushed back. She hit him." Nathan looked at Emma, who stared at her shoes. "Emma, what happened?" "Oh, what was Munkis? Sorry." "He said you were still just a janitor pretending to be smart." Nathan's chest tightened. "And you hit him?" "He wouldn't take it back." Owen's father, a man in a suit who looked like he'd come straight from work, spoke up. "This is completely unacceptable. Your daughter assaulted my son." "After he insulted her father," Nathan said evenly. Words don't justify violence. I agree. But maybe your son should learn not to insult people based on their jobs. My son was stating a fact. You were a janitor. Nathan met the man's eyes. I was a maintenance contractor. I'm now a senior engineer who designed the technology that's currently saving my company from collapse. What I was doesn't define what I am, and your son needs to learn that. Principal Morris held up her hand. Both children are getting detention. Emma, you cannot hit people no matter what they say. Owen, you need to apologize for being unkind. Owen mumbled an apology. Emma accepted it reluctantly. After the meeting ended, Nathan drove Emma home in silence. She stared out the window, her expression somewhere between defiant and ashamed. I know I shouldn't have hit him, she said finally. No, you shouldn't have. But he kept saying mean things about you. Emma, people are going to say mean things sometimes. That doesn't give you permission to hit them. You stood up to people at work. You told me it was the right kind of trouble. Standing up for yourself and hitting someone are different things. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm sorry. I know, but you need to find better ways to handle this. Use your words. Walk away. Tell a teacher. Don't use your fists. Okay. That night, after Emma was in bed, Nathan sat on the couch and thought about Owen's father's words. Still, just a janitor, pretending to be smart. The comment shouldn't have bothered him. He knew his own worth. But it did. Because part of him still felt like he was pretending. Still felt like the maintenance uniform was his real identity, and the engineering work was just an elaborate performance. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Board meeting tomorrow. They want an update on full production timeline. Can you join? Nathan stared at the message. 6 months ago, he'd been invisible. Stared at. Now he was being asked to address the board again. To help shape the company's future. To be the person everyone looked to for answers. He typed back. I'll be there. Because maybe he wasn't pretending. Maybe he'd just been hiding, and now he was finally becoming the person he was always supposed to be. The board meeting the next morning felt different than the last one. Nathan walked into the conference room and the 9 board members were already there, but this time several of them nodded at him in recognition. The woman with silver hair, her name was Dr. Patricia Chen, Nathan had learned, actually smiled when he sat down beside Claire. Nathan, good to see you again. I've been reviewing the performance data from the limited release. Impressive work. Thank you. Richard Voss sat at the far end of the table, his expression neutral, but his posture tense. Nathan could tell the man was waiting for something to go wrong, some vindication that his caution had been warranted all along. But nothing had gone wrong. The systems were performing exactly as Nathan had promised, and that reality seemed to bother Voss more than any failure would have. Claire opened the meeting. We're here to discuss full production timeline and scaling strategy. Nathan's going to walk us through where we are and what we need to move forward. Nathan stood and connected his laptop to the display. The presentation he'd prepared was straightforward. Production capacity, supplier relationships, quality control protocols, projected delivery schedules. He'd learned from the last board meeting that these people responded to data, not promises, so he'd built everything around hard numbers. Based on current manufacturing capacity, we can produce 20 units per month starting in 6 weeks. That scales to 50 units per month within 4 months if we bring a second production line online. Current order backlog is 83 units, which means we're looking at initial fulfillment within 8 months. Days. One of the younger board members, the one with the expensive watch, leaned forward. Quantum Forge is fulfilling orders in 6 weeks. 8 months puts us at a significant competitive disadvantage. Quantum Forge is also dealing with a 20% failure rate in the field. Their customers are requesting refunds and filing complaints. We're offering reliability. That takes time. Time costs money. So do lawsuits and reputation damage. I'd rather take 8 months to deliver something that works than 6 weeks to deliver something that doesn't, Dr. Chen spoke up. What if we prioritized orders from high-profile customers? Companies whose success stories would generate positive press and attract more business? Nathan considered it. We could tier the fulfillment schedule. Priority customers get first delivery, standard customers follow, but we'd need to be transparent about it. No one likes finding out they've been pushed to the back of the line. Agreed. Draft a proposal for tiered fulfillment. Let's see what that looks like. The meeting continued for another hour. Nathan answered questions, defended his timelines, and pushed back when board members suggested shortcuts that would compromise quality. By the end, they'd approved his production plan with minor modifications, and Richard Voss had barely said a word. As people filed out, Voss stopped Nathan in the hallway. "You're good at this." But Nathan wasn't sure how to respond. "Thank you. That's not a compliment. It's an observation." Voss adjusted his tie. "You know what happens to people who are good at this? They stop being able to turn it off. The work becomes everything. They sacrifice relationships, health, perspective. They become exactly what the company needs them to be, and they lose who they were." "Is that what happened to you?" Voss's expression didn't change. "I'm trying to save you from making my mistakes, but you're not listening." "Because I've already made those mistakes. I know what it costs, and I'm not paying that price again. You say that now, but give it time. Give it success and recognition and the feeling that you're building something important. Then see if you can still walk away at 4:15 every day." Voss left before Nathan could respond. The words stayed with him all morning, digging under his skin. Because part of what Voss said was true. The work was starting to feel important again. Not just technically challenging, but meaningful. Nathan was building systems that would last, solving problems that mattered, contributing to something bigger than himself. And that feeling was intoxicating in a way he'd almost forgotten. At lunch, instead of eating with the team, Nathan took a walk around the building and called Mrs. Chen. "Is Emma okay?" "She's fine, Nathan. Why do you always assume something's wrong when you call?" "Because something's usually wrong." Mrs. Chen laughed. "Emma's doing great. She helped me make cookies this morning before school. Burned the first batch, but the second one turned out perfect." "She burned cookies?" She got distracted and forgot to set the timer. But she handled it well. Didn't get upset, just tried again. After they hung up, Nathan stood in the parking lot and thought about that. Emma getting distracted and burning cookies, but trying again without falling apart. That was resilience. That was learning from mistakes instead of being destroyed by them. And it occurred to Nathan that maybe he'd been teaching her that all along without realizing it. Not through his successes, but through his willingness to fail and keep trying anyway. The next few months passed in a rhythm that felt almost sustainable. Nathan worked hard but maintained his boundaries. He arrived at 8 and left at 4:15. He attended Emma's school events, including the field trip to the science museum that he'd promised her. He had dinner with his daughter every night and helped with homework and read bedtime stories. And when the work tried to consume him, when deadlines loomed and problems emerged and the pressure mounted, he reminded himself why he'd made these choices in the first place. The full production launch went smoothly. Orders came in faster than they could fulfill them, which was a good problem to have. Reviews from early customers were overwhelmingly positive. Industry publications started writing about Orion Dynamics as a company that had chosen quality over speed and won. And Claire's leadership style, her willingness to trust her team, to prioritize long-term success over short-term gains, became a talking point in business journals. Nathan found himself being interviewed occasionally, usually by trade publications that wanted to understand the technical innovations behind the calibration system. He hated being in the spotlight, but Claire insisted it was good for the company, so he agreed to a few interviews and tried not to sound like he was reading from a script. One afternoon, about 6 months after the full production launch, David stopped by Nathan's desk with an expression Nathan couldn't quite read. "Claire wants to see you, 5th floor? What's it about?" "She didn't say, but she looked happy, which either means good news or she's about to give you more work." Nathan took the elevator up. Jason waved him through, and Nathan found Claire standing by her window, looking out at the city. She turned when he entered. "Close the door." Nathan did. "What's going on?" "The board met this morning. They want to promote you to VP of Engineering." Nathan sat down without being asked. "What?" "You'd oversee the entire engineering division, manage all the teams, set strategic direction, report directly to me. It comes with a significant raise in equity in the company." "Claire, I can't—" "Before you say no, listen. I know you have boundaries. I respect them. This position would actually give you more control over your schedule, not less. You'd have authority to delegate, to build the team structure you think makes sense, to push back on unreasonable demands from the board. You'd be in a position to make the changes you've been advocating for." Nathan rubbed his face. "I'm barely managing the current job. How am I supposed to run an entire division? The same way you've done everything else. By being honest about what you can handle, by trusting the people around you, and by not trying to do it all yourself. She paused. I'm not offering you this job because I want to overwork you. I'm offering it because you're the only person I trust to build the kind of engineering culture that doesn't require people to sacrifice their families. Can I think about it? Take as long as you need, but Nathan, you're already doing most of this work informally. This would just make it official. That night, Nathan told Emma about the offer. That night, she was sitting at the kitchen table doing math homework, and she looked up with the serious expression she got when she was thinking hard about something. Would you have to work more? Probably not. Maybe different, but not more. Would you still pick me up every day? Yes. Then why are you worried? Nathan sat down across from her. Because the more important the job gets, the harder it is to keep boundaries. And I'm afraid that if I take this promotion, I'll start letting work take over again. Emma set down her pencil. Do you remember when I burned the cookies with Mrs. Chen? She told me about that. I forgot to set the timer because I was thinking about other stuff. And when the cookies burned, I felt really bad. But Mrs. Chen said mistakes are just information. They tell you what to do better next time. That's pretty smart. So if you take the job and you start working too much, that's just information. It tells you to work less. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to notice when you're messing up and fix it. Nathan looked at his 6-year-old daughter and wondered when she'd gotten wise enough to teach him lessons he should have already learned. When did you figure all that out? I've always known it. You just notice more now. The next morning, Nathan told Claire he'd take the position. She smiled wider than he'd ever seen, and within a week, the announcement went out to the company. Nathan Cole, former maintenance contractor, was now VP of engineering. Some people thought it was inspiring. Others thought it was nepotism. Nathan tried not to care what anyone thought and focused on doing the work. The transition was rocky. Nathan had to learn how to manage managers, how to navigate politics he'd previously ignored, how to make decisions that affected dozens of people instead of just his immediate team. He made mistakes, he scheduled too many meetings, and burned everyone out. He delegated poorly and ended up doing work himself that others should have handled. He got frustrated and snapped at people, then had to apologize and rebuild trust. But he also learned. He hired a deputy who was better at the administrative side of the job, freeing Nathan to focus on technical strategy. He instituted flexible scheduling policies that let engineers choose their own hours as long as they met deadlines. He pushed back on the board when they suggested shortcuts, and he backed his teams when they needed more time to solve problems correctly. And he kept his promise to Emma. He left at 4:15 every day. He attended school events. He made dinner and helped with homework and read bedtime stories. The work was demanding, but Nathan had finally figured out how to be demanding back. Demanding that the work fit into his life instead of consuming it. About a year into his VP role, Claire called him into her office on a Friday afternoon. She looked tired in a way that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well, and Nathan felt a familiar worry settle into his chest. What's wrong? Claire gestured for him to sit. Richard Voss resigned this morning. Nathan blinked. Why do threats? He said he's been with the company long enough, that it's time for younger leadership to take over. But between you and me, I think he finally accepted that I'm not my father, and the company's not going back to the way it was. How do you feel about that? Relieved, mostly. Richard and I never saw eye to eye. He wanted control, I wanted collaboration. He saw employees as assets, I see them as people. She paused. But I'm also scared. He was the institutional memory. He knew how everything worked, who to call when things went wrong, which board members needed managing. Without him, I feel like I'm navigating without a map. You're doing fine. The company's thriving. The company's surviving. There's a difference. Claire looked out the window. My father built this place by being ruthless and brilliant and completely unavailable to anyone who needed him personally. I'm trying to build something different, but I don't know if it's actually working or if I'm just lucky. Nathan thought about his answer carefully. You gave me a job when no one else would have. You trusted me to fix a machine that everyone said couldn't be fixed, and then you defended me when I said we needed more time to do it right. You built a company where I can be a good engineer and a good father at the same time. That's not luck, that's leadership. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, but it's right. and that matters more than you think. Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Thank you for everything. I know I don't say it enough, but you've changed this company. You've changed me. You changed yourself. I just showed up when you needed someone." That night, Nathan picked up Emma from school and took her to get ice cream. They sat outside the shop, eating cones that dripped in the late afternoon sun, and Emma asked him about work. "It was good. My boss told me I'm doing a good job." "Bah, of course you are. You're the smartest. You keep saying that because it's true." Emma took a bite of her cone. "Do you ever miss Mom?" The question came out of nowhere, and Nathan's chest tightened. "Every day." "Me too, but it's different now. Like I remember her, but it doesn't hurt as much." "That's good. That means you're healing. Do you think she'd be proud of you? For the job and everything?" Nathan looked at his daughter, this brave, thoughtful person who'd somehow survived losing her mother and watching her father fall apart, and still turned out kind. "I think she'd be proud of both of us. We figured out how to keep going." "Because that's what you do when things are hard. You keep going." "Yeah, that's what you do." The next 2 years passed faster than Nathan expected. Emma grew taller, smarter, more independent. She joined the science club at school and decided she wanted to be an astronaut. She made friends who came over for playdates, and Nathan learned how to host children who weren't his own. She stopped asking if he was going to disappear, because he'd proven over and over that he wouldn't. Orion Dynamics grew too. The company opened 2 new production facilities, hired 300 employees, and expanded into international markets. The calibration system became an industry standard, and competitors tried to copy it, but couldn't match the quality. Claire's leadership style attracted attention from business schools, and she gave talks about building companies that valued both excellence and humanity. And Nathan learned how to be a VP who didn't lose himself in the role. He made mistakes and learned from them. He delegated work he used to hoard. He trusted his team to solve problems without him. He said no to projects that would have required sacrificing his time with Emma. And he discovered that the more he protected his boundaries, the more effective he became at his job. Because people who are present at home can be present at work too. One afternoon, when Emma was 8 years old, Nathan got called to her school for a meeting that wasn't about fighting this time. Her teacher, Miss Rodriguez, wanted to talk about Emma's science project. She built a model of a quantum calibration system, Ms. Rodriguez said, showing Nathan the poster board Emma had created. It was covered in diagrams, equations, and explanations written in Emma's careful handwriting. She said her father designed the real version, and she wanted to understand how it worked. Nathan stared at the project. Some of the details were simplified, but the fundamental concepts were correct. Emma had actually understood the system's architecture well enough to explain it to other third graders. "This is remarkable work," Ms. Rodriguez continued. "I wanted you to know that Emma's exceptionally gifted in science and mathematics. Have you considered advanced placement programs?" Nathan looked at his daughter, who stood beside him looking proud and a little embarrassed. "I haven't thought about it. Emma, is that something you'd want?" "Maybe, but only if I can still do regular school stuff too. I don't want to miss art class." "Then we'll figure it out." That night, after Emma was asleep, Nathan sat on the couch and thought about the path that had brought him here. 3 years ago, he'd been hiding in a maintenance closet, convinced that ambition and family were incompatible. Now he was a VP at a thriving company, raising a daughter who was brilliant and kind and unafraid. He hadn't planned any of it. He'd just made one choice at a time, and somehow those choices had added up to a life that actually worked. His phone buzzed, a text from Claire. "Board meeting next week. They're talking about making you COO. Thought you should know." Nathan stared at the message. Chief Operating Officer, second in command of the entire company. It was the kind of position he never would have imagined when he was changing air filters and emptying trash bins. Part of him wanted it, the challenge, the opportunity, the chance to shape the company's future at the highest level. But another part remembered Richard Voss's warning about people who become exactly what the company needs them to be and lose who they were. He typed back, "Can we talk before the meeting?" 3 dots appeared. "Come by tomorrow, noon." The next day, Nathan met Claire in her office. She looked different than she had when they'd first met, more confident, less exhausted, comfortable in a role that had once felt too big. She'd grown into the job the same way Nathan had grown into his, by making mistakes and learning from them, and refusing to become someone she wasn't. "I'm not taking the COO position," Nathan said before she could start. Claire didn't look surprised. Okay, can I ask why? Because I've finally figured out who I am. I'm an engineer who happens to be good at leadership, not a leader who happens to know engineering. I want to design systems and solve problems and mentor the next generation of engineers. I don't want to run the company. The board's going to be disappointed. The board will survive. Promote David. He wants the administrative work. He's great with people, and he's been doing half the job already. Claire smiled. I actually suggested David in the meeting. The board said they wanted you. Then tell them I said no. Tell them I'm exactly where I need to be. You're sure? I've spent the last 4 years learning to recognize when something doesn't fit. This doesn't fit. Claire nodded. Then I'll tell them. And for what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. As Nathan left her office, he felt lighter than he had in days. Because turning down the promotion wasn't giving up. It was choosing the life he actually wanted instead of the one other people thought he should want. And that choice, that ability to say no to things that didn't serve him, was the most important thing he'd learned since leaving his maintenance closet. That weekend, Nathan took Emma to the Science Museum for the second time. She led him through exhibits she'd already seen on the school field trip, explaining concepts with confidence that made him ridiculously proud. They stopped in front of a display about space exploration, and Emma stared at a model of the International Space Station with the kind of focus Nathan recognized in himself when he was working on a difficult problem. Do you think I could really be an astronaut? She asked. If you want to be. It's hard work, but you're good at hard work. Did you always want to be an engineer? Nathan thought about it. I think I always wanted to solve puzzles. Engineering was just the way I found to do it. I like puzzles too, but I also like stories and art and playing with my friends. Can you be an astronaut and still do other stuff? You can be anything and still do other stuff. That's the secret nobody tells you. You don't have to choose just one thing. Emma looked up at him. Is that what you did? You're an engineer, but you're also my dad, and you still have time for other stuff? I'm trying. I don't always get it right, but I'm trying. I think you get it right more than you think. They spent another hour at the museum, and then Nathan took Emma to get pizza, and they talked about school and friends, and whether dolphins were smarter than dogs. When they got home, Emma fell asleep on the couch during a movie, and Nathan carried her to bed like he'd done 1,000 times before. He stood in her doorway, watching her sleep, and felt a gratitude so deep it almost hurt. This was the life he'd chosen. Not perfect, not easy, but real. He was a good engineer and a good father, and those things weren't contradictory. They were complementary. The skills that made him good at one made him better at the other. Patience, problem solving, the ability to see what was broken and figure out how to fix it. The next few years unfolded in a pattern that felt earned rather than accidental. Nathan continued leading the engineering division, mentoring younger engineers the way he wished someone had mentored him. He taught them that boundaries weren't weakness, that saying no to bad projects was as important as saying yes to good ones, that their worth wasn't measured by how many hours they worked. Some of them listened, some of them didn't. But the ones who listened built careers that didn't destroy their personal lives, and that felt like a legacy worth building. Emma continued growing, continued excelling at school, continued being the bright spot in Nathan's life that reminded him why all the hard choices had been worth it. When she turned 10, she started asking more complex questions about her mother, not just who Rachel was, but what their relationship had been like, why Nathan had worked so much, whether things would have been different if Rachel had lived. Nathan answered as honestly as he could, not hiding his mistakes but also not drowning in them. He told Emma that he had learned too late what mattered most, but that learning late was better than never learning at all. Do you think Mom would have liked who you are now? Emma asked one night while they were doing dishes together. Nathan handed her a plate to dry. I think she would have liked that I finally figured out what she'd been trying to tell me all along. Which was what? That being present is more important than being perfect. That the people you love need your attention, not your achievements. That you can't build a life worth living by sacrificing everything for work. Emma dried the plate carefully. I'm glad you figured it out. Me too, Trouble. Me too. By the time Emma entered middle school, Orion Dynamics had become one of the most respected companies in the industry. Not the biggest, not the flashiest, but the one known for quality and integrity. Claire had built a company culture that valued both excellence and humanity, exactly as she'd promised. And Nathan had been part of that building, proving that it was possible to be brilliant and ambitious and still show up for the people who mattered. Looking back, Nathan realized that the moment that had changed everything wasn't when he'd fixed the calibration system, or accepted the engineering position, or gotten promoted to VP. It was the moment he'd chosen to be invisible, to take a maintenance job that nobody respected, because being invisible to the world meant being visible to his daughter. That choice, that willingness to sacrifice status and recognition to be the parent Emma needed, had taught him what actually mattered. And ironically, it had prepared him to succeed in ways he never could have when success was the only thing he cared about. One afternoon, Nathan was in his office reviewing designs when Claire stopped by. She looked happier than he'd seen her in years, and he suspected good news. "What's going on?" The board just approved a partnership with 3 major universities to create engineering scholarship programs. Full rides for students from underrepresented backgrounds. The program's going to be called the Rachel Cole Memorial Scholarship. Nathan's throat tightened. "Claire, I hope that's okay. I wanted to honor her, and I thought she'd appreciate that we're helping people who might not otherwise get the chance to do work they love." Nathan couldn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you. That means more than you know." After Claire left, Nathan sat in his office and thought about Rachel. She'd died believing he'd never figure out how to balance work and family, believing he'd always choose the career over the people who loved him. But if she could see him now, see the life he'd built with Emma, see the company culture he'd helped create, see the scholarship that would help other people avoid the mistakes he'd made, maybe she'd understand that her death hadn't been meaningless. It had taught him what he couldn't learn any other way. That night, Nathan told Emma about the scholarship. She was quiet for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I wish I remembered her better. You were so young when she died. It's okay that your memories are fuzzy. Do you think she knew you'd figure it out? How to be a good dad?" Nathan pulled Emma into a hug. "I think she hoped I would, but she died before she could see it happen, and that's the part that still hurts. Maybe she can see it now. Maybe wherever she is, she knows." Nathan didn't believe in heaven or afterlife or any of the comforting stories people told themselves about death, but he wanted to believe that Rachel could see them somehow, could see the life they'd built from the wreckage of her absence. So he said, "Maybe. I'd like to think so." As Emma got older, she became more independent, more confident, more certain of who she was becoming. She joined the robotics team at school and won competitions. She made friends who shared her interests and supported her ambitions. She talked about college, about majoring in aerospace engineering, about the future with an excitement that reminded Nathan of himself at that age, before life had gotten complicated, before he'd learned how easy it was to lose the things that mattered most. One day, when Emma was 13, she came home from school and found Nathan working at the kitchen table on a design problem he'd brought home. She dropped her backpack and sat down across from him. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan closed his laptop. "Always. Do you ever regret it? Taking the maintenance job, giving up the big career, basically starting over?" "Never." "Not even a little?" "Not even a little. Emma, I had the big career once. I was successful and respected and completely miserable, because none of it meant anything without people to share it with. Your mom tried to tell me that, but I didn't listen until it was too late. But you got the career back eventually. You're a VP now. I got a different career back, one that fits into my life instead of consuming it. That's not the same thing as what I had before." Emma traced patterns on the table with her finger. "I want to do important things when I grow up. I want to build spaceships and explore and make discoveries. But I also don't want to lose the people I love because I'm too busy being important." Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. "Then don't. Learn from my mistakes. Figure out early what I learned too late, that the most important thing you'll ever build is a life you actually want to live. Everything else is just details." That's not what most adults say. They usually tell me to follow my dreams and work hard and never give up. All of that's true, but it's incomplete. You should follow your dreams and work hard and never give up on the things that matter. But you should also know when to stop, when to rest, when to say no to opportunities that would cost more than they're worth. That's the part nobody teaches you. Emma smiled. "You're teaching me." "I'm trying." Well, that conversation stayed with Nathan for days afterward. Because Emma was right. Most adults didn't teach young people how to balance ambition with humanity. They taught them to chase success at any cost, to sacrifice everything for achievement, to measure their worth by their accomplishments. And then people spent their whole lives learning the hard way that none of it mattered if you were alone at the end. Nathan had learned that lesson through tragedy. Rachel had died before he could prove he'd changed, but maybe he could help other people learn it differently, through example instead of loss. Maybe that was the real point of everything he'd been through, not just to survive it, but to use it to help others avoid the same mistakes. A few months before Emma's 14th birthday, Nathan was asked to give a talk at a technology conference about leadership and work-life balance. He almost said no. He hated public speaking, hated being put on display as some kind of example. But Claire convinced him it mattered, that his story could help people who were struggling with the same questions he'd struggled with. So Nathan stood on stage in front of 500 people and told them the truth. He told them about losing Rachel, about choosing maintenance work over engineering, about learning that being invisible to the world meant being visible to his daughter. He told them about the mistakes he'd made and the lessons he'd learned and the fact that he still didn't have it all figured out. "I'm not standing here to tell you I'm successful," Nathan said. "I'm standing here to tell you that success without presence is meaningless. That you can build amazing things and still lose everything that matters. That the smartest decision I ever made was choosing to be there for one person who needed me, even when it meant walking away from everything else." The audience was silent when he finished. Then someone started clapping, and it spread through the room. And Nathan felt uncomfortable with the attention, but also relieved that maybe he'd said something worth hearing. Afterward, dozens of people approached him with their own stories. Engineers who'd missed their children's childhoods. Executives who'd divorced because they couldn't stop working. Young professionals who were already feeling the pressure to sacrifice everything for career advancement. Nathan listened to all of them and gave the only advice he knew, that they had to decide what mattered most and protect it fiercely because nobody else would protect it for them. One man, probably in his 50s, waited until everyone else had left before approaching. "I've been the CFO of my company for 20 years. I've missed every important moment in my kids' lives. They're adults now, and we barely speak. I wish someone had told me what you just said when I was young enough to do something about it." Nathan didn't know what to say to that. "I'm sorry. Guys, don't be sorry. Just keep telling this story. Because if you can save even one person from making my mistakes, it'll be worth it." When Nathan got home that night, Emma was waiting up for him even though it was past her bedtime. She'd been watching the talk on live stream. "You were really good," she said. "I rambled. You were honest. That's better than good." Nathan sat down beside her on the couch. "Did I embarrass you?" "Why would you embarrass me?" "Sets, I talked about you in front of a lot of people." Emma shook her head. "You talked about us. About how we figured things out together. I'm proud of that." Nathan pulled her into a hug. This teenage person who was growing up too fast and somehow still needed him in ways that made his heart ache. "I'm proud of you too, Trouble. I know." The years continued passing. Emma graduated middle school, started high school, began thinking seriously about college. Nathan watched her grow from a child who'd needed him for everything into a young woman who needed him differently. Not for daily survival, but for guidance and support and the occasional reality check. She was brilliant and driven and kind, everything Rachel would have wanted her to be, everything Nathan had tried to help her become. Orion Dynamics continued thriving under Claire's leadership. The company expanded into new markets, developed new technologies, became the kind of place where talented people actually wanted to work because they knew they wouldn't be asked to destroy their lives for success. And Nathan continued doing the work he loved, mentoring engineers, solving complex problems, proving every day that ambition and humanity weren't mutually exclusive. On Emma's 16th birthday, Nathan took her to the cemetery where Rachel was buried. They hadn't been in a while. Emma had said it made her sad, and Nathan had respected that. But today, Emma had asked to go, said she wanted to talk to her mother about something important. They stood in front of Rachel's headstone together, and Emma told her mother about school and robotics and her plans to study aerospace engineering. She talked about Nathan, about how he'd learned to be present, about how they'd built a life together that was messy, but good. "I wish you could see us," Emma said. "I think you'd be happy with how we turned out." Nathan put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "She'd be really proud of you." "I think she'd be proud of both of us." They stood there for a while longer, and then they went to get ice cream like they always did on Emma's birthday. And they talked about the future Emma was building and the past they'd survived and the present they were living. And Nathan thought about how strange life was, how loss could teach you what nothing else could, how tragedy could break you down and rebuild you into someone better, how the worst moments could somehow lead to the best ones if you were willing to learn from them. That night, after Emma went to bed, Nathan sat on the couch with a beer he didn't really want and thought about everything that had happened since the day he'd heard that clicking sound in the calibration system. 5 years. That's how long it had been since he'd stepped out of invisibility and back into the world. 5 years since Claire had taken a chance on the maintenance worker, who claimed to be an engineer. 5 years since he'd proven that second chances were real if you were brave enough to take them. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Just got word that we won Industry Leadership Award. Ceremony's in 2 months. Hope you'll be there. Nathan smiled. Of course he'd be there. Not because he cared about awards, but because Claire deserved the recognition, and he wanted to support her the way she'd supported him. He typed back, "Congratulations. Well deserved." 3 dots appeared. "Couldn't have done it without you." Nathan set down his phone and looked around his house. Small, comfortable, filled with evidence of the life he'd built with Emma. Photos on the walls, her drawings from when she was younger, the science fair trophies she'd won, the ordinary clutter of 2 people sharing space. It wasn't fancy or impressive, but it was real. It was enough. And that, Nathan had finally learned, was the whole point. Not to build something perfect or achieve some impossible standard. Just to show up. To be present. To do the work you loved with people you cared about. To make mistakes and learn from them. To choose what mattered and protect it fiercely. To understand that success measured in anything other than the relationships you maintained and the person you became was ultimately hollow. He'd learned it too late to save his marriage, but he'd learned it in time to be the father Emma needed. And maybe that was the only victory that actually mattered. Outside, the night was quiet. Inside, his daughter slept peacefully in her room, secure in the knowledge that her father would be there in the morning. And Nathan sat in the living room of his small house, finishing a beer he didn't really want, and felt more successful than he'd ever felt during all those years when success was the only thing he chased. Because in the end, the greatest achievement of his life wasn't saving a corporation or designing revolutionary technology. It was simply being present for a little girl who'd believed in him when nobody else did. Who'd taught him that being smart meant knowing what mattered. Who'd shown him that the most important work anyone ever does is showing up for the people they love.